Hello, and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host, Rob. In today's video, this could be a little controversial. This might seem like a bit of a hot take, but I'm going to say that, in my opinion, utility is overrated in Dungeons and Dragons. So, I'm not saying utility is worthless. I'm not saying it's terrible. I'm not even saying that it's not good. I'm just saying that, to me, utility is something that every class can kind of bring. Some more than others, of course. Bards are way near the top. Wizards are way up there. Barbarians are a little on the low side, But I think that, in general, a lot of people seem to overrate utility, in my opinion. And maybe I'm wrong. That's entirely possible. But anyways, this idea came about because I was recently playing a game of Shadowrun with a bunch of my friends. And some of these people from Shadowrun, I've never played Dungeons & Dragons with before. I've only played Shadowrun with them. But I know that they've all played Dungeons & Dragons. So before we really got into the game, we started talking about the new player's handbook and what people thought and whatnot, right? And I was saying, I haven't played any games with it yet, so I really don't have much to say. But a lot of the people seemed to be very impressed with one of the buffs to Sorcerer. And I said, well, I'm all for any buffs to Sorcerer. I love Sorcerers. But they all seem to think that this was a very, very much needed buff. And I was like, why? And a couple of them were like, because sorcerers are trash. And I was like, what are you talking about? Now, maybe this is just some recency bias because I'm currently playing a sorcerer, right? But I've played other sorcerers before, too. And I've always felt sorcerers were pretty decent. Yes, obviously, if we're comparing them to wizards, Rob Vera and I just did a video not too long ago, a couple weeks ago, I guess, or 3 weeks ago. And we both kind of conceded that, yeah, wizards, especially once you start getting the tier 3 and 4, start to kind of pull away. The spell list is quite a bit better. But it's really not an issue for sorcerers until you start getting into like 6th, 7th, and higher level spells, right? You don't have Force Cage, wizards do. But that's a 7th level spell. You don't have Simulacrum, 7th level spell. Contingency would be nice at 6th level. Clone, Maze, both 8th level. I would really like to have 9th level spells like True Polymorph instead of Mass Polymorph. I think True Polymorph is just way better, I wish we had like Foresight and stuff like that. But again, we're talking like 9th level spells. And most campaigns are never going to get that high anyway. So I don't really consider wizards to be that much stronger than sorcerers, especially if we're talking some of the better sorcerer subclasses. And I will concede that sorcerers are much more reliant on having a good subclass than wizards are. Wizards, any subclass, you're probably going to be pretty decent. Some are obviously better than others, but none of them suck. There's no wild magic sorcerer when it comes to wizard, But I also, in a Ranger video of mine, I said that Rangers are probably the most improved class from the 2014 Player's Handbook through to like Tashes, right? Over time, I thought they probably were the class that got the most through more additional books. But Sorcerers were probably number 2, in my opinion. They were in a really, really good state by the time you get Tashes and all, the Clockwork Soul and the Aberrant Mind are both great. We got the Lunar Sorcerer from Dragonlance, which it's pretty decent. It's, kind of mid-tier, I think, personally. Maybe slightly above mid, but somewhere in there, right? But Shadow Sorcerers are pretty good. There's quite a few. Divine Soul, of course. I can't believe I almost missed them. But I will admit that Sorcerers are a little more dependent on the subclass. But basically, a couple of my friends went on these huge tirades about how they thought Bards were just so much better than Sorcerer. And I'm like, okay, I'm not trying to say Bards are bad by any means. Bards are really, really, really good. But if you're going to be talking about things like Song of Rest, I have to be injured. I have to be taking a short rest anyways. And I have to be spending hit die. Getting an extra D6 or D8, depending on what level we're at. Maybe it's even higher, if we're high enough level. It's nice, but it's not huge, right? And it's like, okay, well, you have things like Jack of all trades. I'm like, yes, Jack of all trades is awesome. And I agree that having more utility is better than not having utility. But I would generally prefer somebody who specializes at something and is very good at the task over somebody who's kind of good at a bunch of different tasks. And I'm not saying bards can only be kind of good either. Like if you're going for like a party face type character, bard is probably the best choice in the entire game. They are the pinnacle of the party face, you know? But I've also seen people say like, oh, well, if we don't have a rogue, then my bard can take expertise in thieves tools and stealth. It's like, okay, but then you're probably not going to have expertise in persuasion and deception, right? I mean, maybe at higher levels when you get more expertise options, but, you know, not for the majority of the game, you know? Like, we can't pretend that you're just going to have expertise in everything just because you have expertise. You're going to have expertise in a couple skills, you know? Just like it's dishonest to pretend that sorcerers, oh, I could have all these different meta magics. Well, you're probably going to have 2, right, for the majority. Maybe you take meta magic adept feat, that brings you up to 4. That's a big deal, but that's also a feat choice, right? So you can't pretend, oh, but if I need fire damage or cold damage, I can just take transmuted spell and I can change all my spells. Oh, and I can quicken all my spells, and I can twin cast my spells. You know, well, you probably can't. You're picking a couple meta magics, right? So, you know, let's try to keep things fair across the board. We spent a bunch of time kind of talking and arguing about magical secrets. And I'm like, you know, magical secrets is a phenomenal ability. In fact, it's one of the best abilities of any of the classes. Like, but unless you're a lore bard, you're not getting magical secrets until level 10. So it's going to be, you know, if you're playing something like Rime of the Frost Maiden, Ravenloft, you know, like the majority of the published adventures, like Tomb of Annihilation goes to 11, Saltmarsh goes to 12, you know, the first 2 I mentioned go to 10. Like a lot of the adventures only go to 10th or 12th level. Yes, there are some others, right? You know, Dungeons of Mad Mage goes to 20. The Vector one goes from 10 to 20. Out of the Abyss and the 2-part Tiamat one, Rise of Tiamat one, goes 1 to 15 each, right? So does Princess Apocalypse. So I'm not saying there's nothing that goes higher, but the majority of campaigns are going to 10, 11, 12. So you're going to get 2 magical secrets, and they're going to come late into that adventure or campaign. Maybe even at the very, very end. Meta Magic's at level 3. Now, if your campaign goes higher, that bard can get 2 more magical secrets at 14, giving him 7th level spell options from any table. That's pretty great. And at 18, he gets 2 9th level spell options from any table, which granted one of those is probably going to be Wish, but still that gives you another great option. And Wish is the best spell anyway, so that's fine, right? So again, I'm not saying that magical secrets aren't great. I'm saying though that magical secrets is like a 10 out of 10 ability that comes on late, compared to meta magic, which is maybe an 8 out of 10 ability, but you're getting it at level 3. And you're going to be able to use it for the vast majority of your entire career. You know, my one friend made a comment about bards being like a Swiss Army knife, and this isn't meant to be like a sorcerers versus bards. It's utility versus specialization. But bards are kind of like a great example of utility, and that's who we were arguing about. And sorcerers are more, you know, meta magic allows you to like do things with magic that normally people couldn't do, right? So to me, that's kind of like the height of specialization. So they're convenient classes to argue about, but it's really not specifically about these 2 classes anyways. But my friend made the argument that bards were like a Swiss Army knife, right? And I hadn't thought about it when we were talking. I thought about it today when I was at work. And I thought, you know, I wish I would have thought to say to him that a Swiss Army knife is really only great if I don't have a better knife for the tool. Like if I'm out hunting and I need to skin a deer, I'd rather have a hunting knife. If I'm buttering my toast at home to have a quick snack, I'd rather have a butter knife. If I get attacked in my home and I need to fight off a home invader, you know, obviously a combat military knife would be best, but, you know, I'd settle for a large kitchen knife probably. In every case, I'd rather have that than the Swiss Army knife. Now, if you're saying, would you rather have a Swiss Army knife compared to nothing, then yes, I would take a Swiss Army knife. But I would rather have a specialized tool that's better at that specific task than a kind of more generic tool that isn't as good, if that makes sense, right? And to give bards some due, I do think that in a smaller sized party, utility becomes a lot more valuable. Like let's say you have a 3-person group. Well, you probably can't have like a really solid like tank plus a dedicated healer plus a rogue and some sort of like, counterspell magic type guy, because you just don't have enough party members to fill those gaps. Whereas someone like a bard, you're like, okay, well, we don't have a cleric, but I can heal. Oh, and we also need somebody with counterspell. Well, I'm going low bard. I could pick up counterspell as one of my level 6 magical secrets. I can also pick up some other spells if we need. I've got some crowd control. That kind of utility is phenomenal in a smaller party, and the fact that you could also be like kind of this talking, negotiating face type character as well just makes it even better. But once you start getting to like a 5-person party, for example, where you start going upwards of that, then you don't really need like a Valor Bard in like a 2-person party. You could be like, hey, let's try to avoid combat, but if we can't, I can wear medium armor and use a shield, and I do get 2 attacks around, so I can kind of tank for us, even though there's only 2 of us, But you don't need a Valor Bard to tank when you've got a 5-person party, because you're probably going to have a Barbarian or a Fighter or a Paladin or somebody who can actually do that job much better. And you don't need somebody who's going to be probably like, I can take Healing Word and maybe another healing spell. I can fit those in. If you have a Cleric in your party. And like the more characters you have in your group, the more these specialty type of roles are just better filled by somebody who can specialize. And I'm not saying the Bard couldn't specialize in those roles too, right? I'm just saying that if the Bard is just basically going to be a cleric, essentially, but with inspiration, I guess, then you're sacrificing a lot of the utility that first drew people to the Bard, probably, because you're just, whittling it down more. And you still have Jack of all trades, you still got expertise. I'm not saying you have no utility just because you decide to make a healing bard, right? That's not what we're saying. I'm just saying that, the more you specialize, the less overall utility you have, And bard, because of things like Jack of all trades, still manages to always maintain a certain level of utility, right? So they're never going to be completely out of that game. I'm just saying that as you get a bigger group, having a guy who's like, he's like the 4th best tank and like the 3rd best healer. Okay, so you're kind of meh at everything. Meh at everything's good when you've only got 3 people, because you need to fill all those spots, right? But if you've got 5 people, 6 people, it's not really as valuable. Meanwhile, when I look at things like meta magic, it allows me to do things with my spells that I normally wouldn't be able to do. Like Twin is one of the best examples for this. And yes, Twin's very expensive, obviously, but it just allows you to like concentrate on like essentially the same spell twice. I was going to say 2 spells, but really it's the same spell twice, But that's something that normally you wouldn't be able to do, right? Like Twin casting haste on 2 of your big melee guys or damage guys, right? Like maybe one's a ranger using a bow, whatever, right? He's got sharpshooter going, and then you're also like hasting the Barbarian, for example. There's a lot of value in something like that. The fact that you can like change your action economy by choosing to quicken cast a spell if you took quicken, or change the damage type on something like Fireball. It's like, oh, I really like Fireball, but fire is one of the most common resistance and immune types in the game, and you start kind of getting into encounters where like, everything's immune to fire, and this kind of sucks. It's like, no, well, what if I can just change the damage type to something else? Suddenly it's not a problem. Suddenly Fireball is a lightning ball, or an acid ball, or, whatever other type of ball energy attack I needed it to be, right? It could be any of that. And it just adds so much more usefulness to the spells, right? It's like, you still have very limited spell selection in general. We're talking across the base class. We're not taking specific subclasses into account here. But bards have that same kind of problem. They're not like a wizard where they just got every spell for every level practically. You've got limited choices too as a bard. But the sorcerer can get so much more value out of these spells because they can do so many different things with them, right? And for me, I think this, like, I've even talked about this, especially a lot in my old series where I did all the tier rankings for multi-classes, right? And one thing I talked about in those videos quite a bit is that to me, multi-classing for utility, while being a perfectly valid reason to multi-class, it is weaker than somebody who just wants to like double down on their core proficiency, you know? And I gave examples like saying, you know, maybe you're a barbarian and you multi-class that with like fighter or something like that, and now you can action surge and just attack even more. Maybe you just say, you know, I want to be like a, you know, like a crit fisher type for character, for example. Crit fishers aren't necessarily the best. A lot of random chance that you can't always depend on, but they can be fun, right? So maybe you decide I've got advantage from reckless attack, and if I combine that with champion who's critting on a 1920, now I'm just getting even more crits, and I'm doing it in a different way. It's not a conflicting way, it's a complementary way, right? And those kind of things can be like really, really good when you start like say, I'm going to take the strengths from this class and the strengths from this class and combine them together, you know? What's usually not as strong is when you say, I'm going to do this, but I'm also going to slow down my level progression to add in a little bit of this. Okay, that could be good, right? Like I said, depending on your party and composition, depending on how many people you have in your group, that could be perfectly fine. Maybe you just want to do it because you think it's going to be fun and flavorful. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like, not everything has to be this like optimized power game type of mentality, you know? But I find, like, you know, if we're going to have a total party wipe, it's probably going to come in combat. And, you know, so I will at least want to be competent in that area. And that doesn't necessarily mean damage. It could mean crowd control. It could mean like battlefield control type effects. It could just mean like buffing and supporting my allies better, you know. Like Twilight Domain Cleric is phenomenal. And it's not because they're doing truckloads of damage. It's because they can just be giving people temporary hit point shields every round of the combat, right? Peace Domain Cleric, great support class. And it does it by sharing the hit points between all the different group members, right? It isn't about doing more damage. It's about whether or not, you know, you feel that you're bringing something really, really valuable to your table, right? Another thing I want to say is that I do sometimes find that my satisfaction in a character that I play is often tied to my expectations for that character. If I think that this character is going to do tons of damage and it turns out they're kind of mid, I'm probably going to be disappointed, even if I'm doing more damage than some of the other people in the party. Because I'm not really comparing it to them. I'm comparing it to the expectations I had, right? If I think this character is going to have this like really cool thing, and I'm going to be like able to buff all my allies and it's going to be so good, and then it turns that it's not really working, or it's not really gelling, or there's things I didn't think of, like maybe I need to go early in the initiative order to cast my buff, and then the party, you know, we've got a Gloomstalker Ranger who's getting dexterity and wisdom bonuses, and he took alert, so he's always going way up in the initiative order, and I'm way down here, you know. And suddenly you start running into those kind of problems you might not foresee. But that's probably going to leave me feeling like, you know, maybe this wasn't the best. I think an example would be like, let's say you're going to see a movie with a friend, right? And your friend, he just cannot wait to see this movie. He thinks it's going to be like a 9 out of 10, just an absolute legendary epic banger, one of the greatest movies he's ever seen in his life, right? And you have like really low expectations. So he goes in thinking this movie's going to be a 9 out of 10, but it turns out to be a 7. You go in thinking it's going to be a 5 out of 10, but it turns out to be a 7. Well, you're probably going to be pretty happy with the movie because your expectations were way down here and the movie was here. But he's probably going to be disappointed, even though he also thinks it's a 7 out of 10 because his expectations are way up here and the movie was only mid. You know, well, I mean, 7 out of 10 is still pretty good, but you know what I'm saying, right? He thought it was going to be here, it was here. You thought it was going to be here, it was here. So you're happy and he's not, because even though at the end of the day you both thought it was a 7, one of you had your expectations not met, and one of you had your expectations exceeded, right? And so often I find that when I'm personally playing utility characters, I'm not saying they can't be fun, but a lot of times I just kind of want my character to do something well. And when I do everything kind of 6 out of 10, 5 out of 10 type range, I just usually don't find it very satisfying. And again, this doesn't mean that my friends were wrong in that well, not really argument, but in that discussion, and that I was right. He has his point of view, I have mine. That's fine, right? I'm just saying, but as I was thinking about it more and more, I thought, it is really clear to me that a lot of other people value utility much more than I do. And maybe they're right to do so. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. That's fine too, right? But I always find that I would rather play a character who is really good at the thing I wanted them to be good at, rather than being kind of good at a bunch of different things. And I think for some people, they're the exact opposite. They like those characters that don't really have any like real weaknesses or flaws. And they don't care if they're like the best at whatever they wanted to be. They kind of want to be good at everything. They want that character who's a 7 out of 10 at everything, right? I kind of want that character who's a 9 out of 10 at the one thing. And I don't care if I'm a 3 out of 10 at something else, because I wasn't designing a character to be that. And my philosophy is that, the guy who is designing his character to be that, he can be an 8 or a 9 out of 10 in that area. So I can be a 3. It doesn't matter, right? If I'm playing a barbarian, I'm not looking to do a lot of buffing and healing for my party members. I'm just not. But I am looking to probably do a bunch of damage and get in people's faces and create a big, difficult to deal with like target that the enemy is going to have to focus on, right? And if I'm able to do that, I'm probably going to be pretty happy with the character. And if I'm not, I'm probably going to be a little dissatisfied. It doesn't mean that the character sucks. It doesn't mean the class sucks. It just means that I personally am probably going to think, I probably should have done this or this instead. And I'll probably spend a bunch of time thinking about it and evaluating and trying to figure out how I could have done it better or what else I could have taken or whatever, right? And that's fine, That's part of the fun of D&D, is I like thinking about these kind of things and theorizing on how to improve different builds or how to make things different. And I like talking to other people about this kind of stuff. Like, even though I kind of framed my discussion with my friend as kind of a disagreement or an argument, the truth is I really valued his perspective because he's giving me ideas that maybe I hadn't thought about before, And like I said, he could be completely right. I could be completely wrong. That's fine. I mean, obviously, I kind of lean towards my own opinion more, but that's fine, right? This is one thing I like about talking with other people because, their tables have had different experiences. My tables have not, I played in a campaign where the entire party were bards and we were like in a band, right? And we were allowed to multi-class as well, but we had to have 3 levels of bard, the DM said, because he wanted everybody to have a subclass, right? And while the campaign was a lot of fun and the party was okay, we had a lot of people that were like really good at playing instruments and had super high performance skills and weren't necessarily good at much of anything else. We did have a paladin bard multi-class, and that guy was really good because he went, with College of Blades, and then also took a bunch of paladin levels, so he could smite and actually had extra attack and could fight fairly well. Whereas most of us were great at singing, and that was really about it. But it also kind of showed me that, while having one utility guy might be really, really good, having like 6 utility guys is not necessarily great. I would probably rather have a party that was, more focused in other areas, to say the least. And granted, that's an extreme example, right? Obviously, most of the time, you're not going to have a party of 6 bards, right? But, we did. So that's kind of what happened there. And the party, I shouldn't say it sucked, but, we were not very optimized at all. And that can be kind of fun in its own way. And it was a fun campaign, right? And a part of the ridiculousness of it was also part of the fun. So that's okay too. But anyways, like I said, I realize this is going to be kind of controversial, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who disagree with me, and that's fine too, right? But I personally like somebody who's kind of like a specialist in their chosen area, and maybe they have a couple other areas that are decent too, right? Nothing wrong with that. But, if I want to be good at something, I want to actually be good at it. And I'm willing to sacrifice in those other areas because I have teammates who can make up for those lacks. And then, that's the other thing too. I kind of want to be good in my field, but let the other players be good at theirs too. I don't want to like hog all the attention and the spotlight by trying to do everything all the time, right? It's fine to let other characters have their like great moments too, and that kind of support them and help them and encourage them in those areas. I love when other people are like, oh, my character can do this, and then we figure out cool ways to like use that, and maybe we haven't tried it before. Different cool combinations that we could do with that character or with other people in the party. One guy concentrating on one spell and him concentrating on his spell, and then we combine that for cool and unique ideas to kind of change combat. And that kind of stuff is fun because it allows these other people to really get into their character and find that kind of niche that maybe they didn't even know was there, and to really have those moments to shine, right? And so, I kind of like it when characters are, good at this, and you're good at this, and he's good at this, and this person's good at that. You don't all have to be mediocre at everything. But anyways, I know this sounds like it's an anti-Bard video, and it's not, because like I said, Bards, despite being mediocre at a lot of stuff, thanks to Jack of all trades, they can also be exceptional at different things too, right? So I'm not, Bard isn't really just this Jack of all trades, master of none. They can be the master of a lot of different types of things. But I think a lot of times when people think about Bards and even some of the other classes as well, this emphasis is really put on, well, yeah, but they can kind of do everything. And it's like, they can kind of do everything. But that's kind of my issue with it, is that, it's only kind of. But anyways, I just wanted to, I guess, vent my thoughts, put them on my channel. If people agree, that's fine. If they disagree, that's fine. They can give me their own experiences and stuff as well. But anyways, I think that's everything I have to talk about. So thank you for watching. Feel free to like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and most importantly, leave me your comments in the comment section. I'm sure there's other people who probably agree with me. I'm sure there's people who disagree. I'm sure there's going to be some people who, despite all of my attempts to qualify and give disclaimers, are going to be like, oh, so you hate Bards? Is that what you're saying? You hate Bards? It's the internet. That stuff happens, sadly. But I don't hate Bards. I actually like Bards quite a bit. I'm just saying I like sorcerers even more, okay? That's all I'm saying. I love sorcerers. I got Warlock and I got Sorcerer. Oh, by the way, and if we're ranking the arcane classes, even though Warlock is my favorite class in the entire game, I'd actually put Sorcerer ahead of Warlock too. Warlocks are very customizable, and you can make like cool Gish builds and stuff with Warlocks. But if we're talking actual single class characters, most people don't even play single class Warlocks. They multi-class out all the time, and Warlocks have certain disadvantages of their own, like incredibly limited spell slots, and the fact that, if you do get to higher levels, you've got like one choice for 6th level spell, one choice for a 7th level spell, one 8th level spell, one 9th level spell, Whereas sorcerers, granted, they kind of struggle at higher levels too, but you could, potentially have a couple 6th or 7th level spells, and at least you've got a couple of different options. It's better than one option only. I mean, this is where wizards really start to shine, is at the higher levels. You're just like, well, I've got like 12 different 9th level spells that I have known. I'll just prepare like a couple of them, and whatever I need, I can swap it out on a long rest. Freaking wizards. But anyways, that's everything. Thanks for watching. Like I said, leave me your comments, most importantly, and I'll see you next time. Bye.